Okay, I'm Jeff Braun. I'm an emeritus professor at the University of Illinois, and I have the honor of introducing Dr. May Berenbaum, who's our keynote speaker today. May, it's hard to encompass what May has done, so I'm going to read some and I'll break out of the formality a little bit. But May Berenbaum has been on the faculty of the Department of Entomology at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign since 1980. She has served as head of the department since 1992. That has got to be a record. That has got to be a record. I was a department head for 11 years and I'm still in therapy. She's done it for over 30 years. And she has held the Swanland Chair of Entomology since 1996. Her research is focused on interactions between insects and flowering plants, ranging from pollinators to crop pests, and on the application of ecological principles towards sustainable management practices. A member of the National Academy of Sciences since 1994, she chaired the Committee on the Status of Pollinators in North America and testified before Congress on issues relating to honeybee health and pollinator decline. In addition to publishing more than 300 refereed scientific papers, she is devoted to public engagement in science and has authored numerous articles, as well as 6 books about insects for the general public, and has founded several outreach and citizen science activities, including Bee Spotter and the U of I Pollinatarium. In 2011, she received the Tyler Prize for Environmental Achievement, and in 2014, she was presented with the National Medal of Science from President Barack Obama. And one thing that's not on this script is, May also annually organized what's called the Insect Fear Film Festival, which was movies that devoted to arthropods and insects. That was my kids' favorite thing to go to annually, and it really it was just a joy to go to that, and May was great, and it was just something that was just wonderful to attend to. So without further ado, May Berenbaum.
How do I do this? Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
I'm kind of
Yes, thank you, May, for troubleshooting that. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with us. May, it looks good. We can see your slides. I think you're good to go.
even if there's that list of participants. Do you see that, or do I?
No, we don't see that. You're good.
Oh,
It's good
fantastic!
on our end.
Great.
Yeah.
I don't know why I see it. All right. Well, this will be interesting because I can only see part of my screen, but let's go for it.
Good. Take a breath. It's all good. Everything looks great. You're ready to go. Oh,
That's threat
whatever.
protection. Okay. Oh, that's it, right?
I think we've got a different browser up. Just close whatever this is. Just minimize. Hit the yellow button.
Yeah, I know the yellow button.
Okay.
Here.
All right.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, this is interesting because I can't read my script, but all right. So thank you. I'm glad I've been words can say to be here because among other things, it involved being in 2 places at once, and that's not possible. I thought Zoom would make it easy, but apparently the technological challenges started when the hotel internet went out, the Wi-Fi system went out. So I'm here because my student Lance, who is supported by Midwest Cask, asked if I would be interested and willing to give a keynote lecture for gathering of the Midwest Cask, and I was of course absolutely delighted to, and I want to thank Corey Susky and Jeff Braun and any other individuals who were instrumental in letting me come to you virtually. Okay, I was given the advice that an especially good thing to do would to present would be some combination of discussions of insect abundances, role of climate change and possible adaptations, to, and the note, informative course, the subject matter is up to you, and the audience is a mix of academics, agency, NGO people, students, and the interested public. So I don't know how many are there, but thank you, and thank you for your patience. And this is going to be, nope, really hard for me to not see my script. Oh, all right. Let's go. We're going to wing it here. So throughout history, insects have attracted attention and caused problems, mostly when their populations increase and there are population explosions. At least 4 of the biblical 10 plagues involve insects reaching plague-like proportions in populations. So again, the main concern, global crop losses amount to something on the order of $220 billion, according to the USDA estimate. So population increases have long been part of human history, long been a concern, and have been the subject of years, decades, centuries of research, actually millennia. People were devising ways to control crop pests in ancient Egypt, even though, as it turns out, prayer didn't appear to be a very successful pest management approach. So, on the other side, there are times when population declines are concerning. This is the rosy apple moth, and it's too bad you can't see the text, because in 1903, William Holland wrote in his moth book, The Guide to Moths of North America, that this moth species, this was in 1903, he describes as being formerly abundant, but quite rare in the present time. And he speculated that its decline was probably associated, or probably said, no doubt, to electric lights and gas wells, which have spelled death for moths ever since they were invented, because they are irresistibly drawn to point sources of light at night. And I can advance, yeah. So now that was a change in population density, average population size. There have been documented actual extinction events, so decline to the point of non-existence. And they have occurred in historical time, and people actually documented the disappearance. I guess, flag bearer for declining insect species is Glaucopsyche xerxes, which is the Xerxes blue butterfly, which is thought to have gone extinct in the 1940s as a result of sand mining in the area of San Francisco, where it was endemic. It was restricted to a handful of host plants that could be found only in the sandy areas. And when the sandy areas were paved over for an airport, that was the end of Glaucopsyche xerxes, at least in flesh and blood, or flesh and hemolymph. It's now the symbol for the Xerxes Society for Invertebrate Conservation. This is an organization that's been around, I think, since the 70s, at least in part because up until that point, people didn't really appreciate the fact that insects could go extinct. Now, by the middle of the 20th century, ornithologists, not entomologists, but ornithologists had linked range shifts in birds to climate change indirectly through food webs. So this is a paper written in 1975 by John Burton, the effect of recent climatic changes on British insects, in the journal Bird Study. So unsurprisingly, the shifts were first noticed in Lepidoptera. Lepidoptera, the butterflies and moths, are favorites of amateurs of all descriptions, and their population fluctuations are often noted because people are happy, are interested in their health. They are favorites of amateurs and hobbyists. I don't know how to shrink this. Let's see if I can do more. Nope. Let's, oh gosh. I don't know why I'm not, there we go. So yeah, please don't look at me. I'm like 2 inches from the screen here. So the effects on birds, this was written by Harris, reviewing climatic changes in bird distributions in Europe since 1860, writing, the effects on birds in most cases might not necessarily have been direct physiological responses. Items in the biological food chain upon which the birds rely, such as insects and vegetation, can be influenced, and this will be reflected in the distribution of the birds. Nor need the effect have been immediate. It is not difficult to see that delays of many years or even decades could arise before this or that species of bird extended their range in response to improving climate, particularly if conditions remain satisfactory in the former habitat. So that was the optimistic view. When climates improve, distributions expand. When climates become inimical, distributions can shrink and even disappear. Again, this was from a 2009 summary, a review of birds and climatic change. So climatic fluctuations must have influenced animals and plants, as they've done since human history, since the earliest times, but only within the present century such events have been documented. This is a survey, draws together data on bird distribution changes thought to have been set in motion by the, quote, amelioration of climate following the 1890s, and postulates how some current trends in England and Scotland may have a basis in the subsequent expansion of the polar easterlies and the weakening circulation over the Atlantic Ocean. The reason this passage is quoted here is the last line: the importance of cooperative bird studies as an aid to monitoring climatic change is discussed. And this paper dates back to 2009, that link has been made, and only later did insects come to the attention of people concerned about climates. So in 1996, Steve Buckman and Gary Nabham published a book called The Forgotten Pollinators. In the foreword, Wilson wrote, humanity must attend to the forgotten pollinators and their countless dependent species. In the index, Wilson included a call for, I wish I could get rid of this, the view. Hold on. All right, well, I'll send you to the source and you can look it up yourself. So since it was first published, this book has been cited, The Forgotten Pollinators, more than 160 times, including almost 24 times this year, even though it was published back in 1996. And the citations this year were in 3 different languages. Very important, influential book, according to pollination ecologist Jeff Allerton. It's an enormously influential book, has helped global policies and actions on, in insect conservation and influenced the research direction and subsequent professional careers of many ecologists and naturalists, which is fortunate because we now know a lot more than we did. Now, so concerns were raised during policy discussions around this time among federal agencies. In 2000, so you see there's the publication of The Forgotten Pollinators. A series of meetings began on convened by the subsidiary body on scientific, technical, and technological advice on the International Pollinator Conservation Initiative. It was a meeting in 1996 of the third conference. October 1998, there was an international workshop on conservation and sustainable use of pollinators in agriculture, resulting in the San Paulo Declaration of Pollination. USDA got involved in 1999, along with the U.S. Geological Survey, for a joint meeting, the first of its kind on pollination. In 2000, Kenya, at the 5th meeting of the Convention on Biodiversity Committee on Pollination, International Initiative for the Conservation and Sustainable Use of Pollination was announced. In 2002, the pollinator initiative was approved at COP6 in the Netherlands. Then North American Pollinator Protection Campaign, formed around this time, approached the National Research Council of the National Academy of Sciences with a request for funding a study to determine exactly what was the status of insects in North America. That study was approved in 2004, commenced in 2005, and I was privileged and honored to serve on that committee as chair. Probably something I brought on myself, among other things. The National Academy was brought in by way of the Board on Agriculture and Natural Resources, and I was chairing that board when the contact was first made. And as soon as I stepped down as chair, I was asked if I would chair this committee. So at that point, I couldn't say no, because our board had recommended the study. And the study examined 5 different questions. Are pollinators experiencing decline? What are the causes? What are the potential consequences? What research and monitoring are needed? And what steps can be taken to prevent or reverse decline? After about 18 months and more than 3,000 references consulted, the committee came out with 2 major conclusions. The one sort of indisputable conclusion based on very robust data was that there was a long-term population decline in the numbers of honeybees in the United States. And that pattern, the data were available because honeybees are managed pollinators. They're economically important, and that's so the counts are reliable. The other conclusion was there are no other data. There are very, very, very few studies documenting decline. In terms of the causes, people had a lot of ideas. The logical candidates included introduced pathogens and parasites, or habitat degradation and loss. Although in the United States, data are in most cases inadequate to demonstrate causation unambiguously. There's evidence that other factors contributed to the decline, changes in phenological synchrony, for example, which was a likely hypothesis. And the distributions of pollinators of plants resulting from global climate change could lead to a decline in interactions between flowers and pollinators. So global climate change was called out in the study released by this committee. Although going through the report, very little information available about effects of climate change on insects for at least two decades of literature. These are the specific callouts that I could find in the study. Point was made that this is like a 300-page report, and this is about it. Pollinator phenology can be influenced by changing global temperatures. And this came to the attention of lepidopterists, who noticed that butterflies could be collected earlier in the year as time went on. If the phenology of flowers and pollinators are acting out of synchrony, then there's a potential for disruption of coordinated interactions. Pollinators depend on corridors with flowers that bloom at appropriate times during spring. And if the timing does not coincide with flowering, the plants could suffer a loss of pollinators and face energetically expensive migratory flights with no opportunity to forage and replenish on the way. As well, if climate change could alter nectar abundance or concentration or quality, that could also change the foraging behavior of pollinators and change their efficacy as in bringing about pollination of plants, and thereby changing floral abundance and distribution. So the testable hypothesis and the proposed mechanism is that loss of synchrony would result in historical mutualisms, or even the creation of novel associations. But the main recommendation of this study was this area of research warrants more attention. in the view of the potential for climate change to disrupt plant-pollinator interactions significantly in the future. So these are just the call outs, and basically you heard them summarized. Well, many National Research Council reports gather dust on bookshelves. This one did not. This one sort of captured the zeitgeist, and in fact was even accompanied for the first time for a National Research Council report by a product for the public. It was called a pollinator wheel, where you could actually dial up a plant, and then way before digital technology, and see the image of the pollinators associated with that flower. So basically this report continues to be cited, and this is a 2025 citation. And it's, I think it's more than 600 citations now. Well, also around this time, there's the release of the pollinators report. What happened around this time when the pollinators report was released was October 2006. October 2006 is when the honeybee genome was sequenced, a product of a large consortium involving universities, U.S. apiculture industry, USDA, NIH, private donors, including industry. And the genome provided some insights into the biology of the honeybee, the Western honeybee, Apis mellifera, the world's premier managed pollinator, and revealed that if in fact honeybees are representative of pollinators, and all 4,000 North American species of bees, virtually all are pollinators. Very few, the ones that aren't, are called cuckoo bees, that eat pollen but steal pollen from the ones who do go out and work in the field. So, so the thought was that pollinators may be less well equipped to deal with some of the stresses that other plant feeding insects deal with. Feeding on consumer-friendly pollen and nectar, which are not loaded with plant secondary metabolites, is poisonous plant compounds. And then the processing that honeybees do, they take nectar, turn it into honey, they take pollen and turn it into bee bread via fermentation, which breaks down some of the toxins, may have led to a reduction in the detoxification capacity of honeybees. To what extent this applies to other insects was not known at the time. But in this, what's in retrospect has been called a perfect storm, October 2006, at the same time the honeybee report was, the honeybee genome was coming out, there was also the first reports of a disturbing phenomenon, ultimately went by the name of colony collapse disorder, began to come in. By February 2007, colony collapse disorder, as it was called, had been reported in more than 20 states. This made headlines in the New York Times, not where you'd think. This was actually reported in the business section of the New York Times, and it was reported in the business section because managed pollination, where honeybees are transported around the United States to deliver pollination services to vast expanses of monoculture cropland, was running short of bees. And there was a massive panic. No one was sure. The almond growers were concerned because they weren't sure they would be able to get the bees they needed for pollination. So that generated a huge amount of interest, and there began a new era in pollination biology research, trying to determine what the factors are that lead to pollinator decline. So there is a congressional subcommittee on horticulture that also oversees apiculture on what was called colony collapse disorder. In March of 2007, about 50 bee researchers and other interested parties arrived at the USDA Beltsville Ag Research facility, which is, I gather, targeted for closure soon, which under the new administrative budget cuts, convened a workshop. Here's the workshop to prioritize colony collapse disorder research. Now, I mention this because climate change was explicitly not a focus. because the group decided that as a gradual process, it seemed an unlikely explanation for, quote, sudden and alarming colony losses, which was essentially the definition of colony collapse disorder, when previously perfectly healthy colonies suddenly lost the vast majority of their foragers, the hard workers of the colony, and leaving behind their queen and immature larvae, which bees, is very uncharacteristic behavior for bees. So this was an economic crisis as well as a biological anomaly, which generated a lot of conversation and a lot of speculation. And also, in retrospect, interestingly, climate change wasn't really advanced as a possible explanation. The most plausible, well, here are the hypotheses. Most likely, there was a new group of pesticides called the neonicotinoids that people suspected might be hurting the bees. Novel pathogens or parasites, because bees are notoriously susceptible to those as social insects. Immune suppression relating to management practices, particularly on sending them out on monocultures where they don't really get a diversity of plant foods, and a decline in the nutritional adequacy of diets that were given, artificial diets given to them by beekeepers. Other hypotheses that were advanced, I'd say less likely, and everything you can think of, all less likely than climate change. Genetically modified corn pollen, cell phones, Wi-Fi, elevated carbon dioxide, elevated UVB, Osama bin Laden, automobile grills, solar maxima, jet chemical contrails, fluctuations in the Earth magnetic field, Soviet mind control experiments. And I'm not kidding, these are all in the newspapers, alien abduction and bee rapture, where all the bees are summoned up to heaven. And leaving nobody behind. Oh, okay. Well, the plausible ones were systematically tested. And as is so often the case, particularly in issues around surrounding climate, that there were multiple explanatory factors. There are interactions of factors. In this case, it was pesticides, pathogens, and parasites, poor nutrition and management were contributing to honeybee declines. But these factors were very likely to have been exacerbated by global climate change. If you could see the rest of this slide, it shows the circle up in the little corner in the right, where you can see it, I can't, but it says climate change. So global climate change can lead to changes in temperature, precipitation, carbon dioxide levels, ozone and nitrogen availability, all of which can influence the diversity and abundance of plant nectar and pollen sources, independent of the direct effects of these abiotic sources, factors on insects. And the quality and quantity of floral sources in turn directly relates to pollinator health. So even by 2015, in a very high profile paper in Science, written by Dave Goulson and collaborators, the headline was "Bee declines driven by combined stress from parasites, pesticides, and lack of flowers." And in this Science paper, Goulson and company wrote, "There's little evidence, strong evidence, that climate changes have yet had any great effect on bees." So why wasn't the evidence strong enough? Well, a lot of confounding factors. As I mentioned, people at that moment in time were searching for a singular explanation. And as it turns out, there wasn't one. There were interacting factors, and that was climate change can exacerbate those interactions. So why did it take so long to establish a link between insect decline and climate change? Because it's complicated. How is it complicated? Well, when you got interacting biological species, global climate change can lead to changes in temperature, precipitation, carbon dioxide, ozone, and nitrogen availability, all of which influence the chemistry of the plants, the primary metabolites of the plants, which affect nutrition. So sugars, for example, nitrogen in the pollen, nutritional quality of the foliage, and there's a list here of the effects on primary chemistry. Global climate change also leads to changes, influences the secondary metabolites, these defensive compounds that plants manufacture even in nectar and pollen to discourage herbivores from consuming them. So these these were mechanisms proposed to account for why there might be a reason to believe that climate change affects plant-insect interactions. So among the greatest challenges was documenting, really got to get rid of this. Sorry. Let me see if I can do this. Nope, I can't. Okay, the greatest challenges were documenting all these interacting factors. Climate change is also accompanied by drought. Drought indirectly or directly can induce changes in secondary chemical production. Very difficult to disentangle, particularly in field studies. Okay. Another factor that was identified early on was land use change. The northern Great Plains, for example, saw massive changes, movement toward monoculture agriculture with a reduction in vast reduction in plant diversity and changes to the abiotic and biotic environment there. So I'll just skip there. In particular, the total in 2013, the total acreage enrolled in the Conservation Reserve Program in 2013 was 25.3 million acres, was the lowest total since 1988 when the program just began. In 2019, the total was less than 24 million acres. CRP was aimed at incentivizing growers to convert marginal or sensitive acreage to more ecologically friendly plant communities, including pollinator plantings, buffer and filter strips, well, windbreaks and the like. Losses in conservation reserve land have been pronounced in much of the country where commercial beekeepers keep their colonies. Moreover, persistent drought in these same states associated with climate change means migratory beekeepers have trouble finding enough food for their bees. So what beekeepers do when their bees provide pollination services for almonds in California and finish with that in February, they'll migrate to blueberries in New England and eventually end up in alfalfa in the Dakotas. But drought had a profound effect on the availability of food for bees. And again, the prolonged drought, persistent drought, was sort of centered in that part of the northwestern and southwestern U.S. are so important to bees. There's the drought monitor. You can see this distinct pattern of persistent drought, which is almost certainly associated with climate change and global warming. Well, all these factors combined, and by 2018 in the popular press, people started talking about an insect apocalypse. There's a New York Times paper that was written that really crystallized the attention. People began to get quite concerned that we are not only going to lose bees, but we're going to lose everything. And climate change was one of the factors that was immediately linked to declines in bees. Here's a study, for example, climate change contributing to widespread declines among bumblebees. This was one of the problems with studying climate change impacts on insect populations, is that there's a long timeline. It sometimes takes many years. In the 2006 study on pollination, the forgotten pollinators, there is reference to a study conducted by Art Shapiro in California over a 20-year period, annual sampling in the same places of flying butterflies, and the differences or the changes between sampling sites did not become apparent until 17 years into the study. So these changes are not instantaneous. They take time. It's difficult to detect them. Museum specimens have helped a lot, determining changes in distribution patterns based on collection data. It's not a completely objective sampling. People are out specifically looking for particular species, but at least it's a historical record of where they were and possibly weren't. And all this information combined to allow investigators to establish that the changes in insect populations were independent of the changing land use patterns. So 2021 saw the publication of a summary paper. Full disclosure, I was an author, one of five authors, I think. It was called Death by 1,000 Cuts: Global Threats to Insect Diversity. This was marshaled at the most recent 20 years of accumulating evidence and identified many different stressors for insect populations. But what I can't see in the corner, and I hope you can, is that many of these were just manifestations of climate change. Some of and their subsequent impacts on insect populations. So most striking among the impacts on insect populations are altitudinal and latitudinal distribution shifts. And these occurred in many, many taxa. This particular example from the paper involves the emperor dragonfly, which shifted northward and to higher elevations, which you would expect if climates in their indigenous or original distribution became intolerably warm. The Sanquino checker spot also moved up mountains and in the process had to switch host plants because as it moved to higher elevations, its preferred plant actually wasn't found. Then another fact of the temperature streams, which affected the populations of bumblebees that were in decline, and the efficiency with which a tiny wasp called Gallus agilus could inject its eggs and parasitize its hosts was also impaired by high temperature. So by 2025, this is a citation analysis of pollinator. You can see here, pollinator and climate change together, not using the word decline. If you do a search of that literature, which amounted to almost 1,800 publications, the most highly cited papers in that group of publications pulled out by that search had decline in their titles, 6 out of 8. So pollinator plus climate change equals declines, basically. Okay, by 2022, at long last, the entomological community had mobilized from 19 different countries to publish a call for action in ecological monographs, stating if no action is taken to better understand and reduce impact of climate change on insects, we will dramatically limit our chances of a sustainable future with healthy ecosystems. So today, the internet is no stranger to references of insects, climate change effects on insects. Now, these are invariably accompanied by stupid bee puns. Bees feel the sting of climate change. There's one, the buzz about bees and climate, not exactly a laughing matter. And also not exactly accurate here in this picture that's accompanying a paper expressing concern of climate change as a threat to, a menace to, quote, wild bees. These are actually yellow jackets, not bees. But we're not done yet. There was a recent meta-analysis, which was a meta-analysis. It was a review of 75 meta-analyses of global change stressors that were related to negative effects on insects and insect reproductive success. Only a few considered global warming, and very few considered the effects of multiple stressors. Those that did, they were largely negative. And this led to a call for, again, more active monitoring and coordination. And coordination and collaboration and communication are key because this is a global phenomenon. One of the saddest things about it is that the vast majority of work is being done in the Northern Hemisphere, and the vast majority of insect diversity is not in northern temperate regions. It's mostly in the Southern Hemisphere and tropical regions. So we have an intense effort and probably innovations in mitigation that are deriving from data in a part of the world that reflects only a very small fraction of total insect diversity. So it's good we're finally doing something. Why did it take so long? Is the boiling frog a moral fable? Or, as the frog suggests, is it a deranged myth? But we spent a long time, and I include myself in this, of ignoring the warning signs, and even in some cases ignoring the warning. So I can convince anybody of anything here. Sometimes it's important to act, and it may go against scientific instincts, but it may be important to put mitigations in place before P is less than 0.05. You may not have the luxury, given the pace at which the world is changing, to wait until statistical significance. And that goes against everybody's insistence on evidence-based policy. But in point of fact, P is less than 0.05 is kind of an artificial construct in any case. And if the world's on fire, it might be useful to go in with a fire extinguisher without asking for permission. Bad analogy. I don't have my notes with me. I would say it's a poignant metaphor, not an outrageous fable or alarmism. Sometimes the alarmists are right, and it's not a message I thought I would be giving, but or delivering. But I think, in view of recent evidence, the large body of evidence, that it may behoove us to act more boldly in the future. Every passing year produces more evidence of the detrimental effects of climate change on insects, some of which we could not, even with all constraints on imagination removed, imagine. Climate change even affects insect colors and sex lives. And yeah, why did it take so long? And we shouldn't have to wait until it's as unpleasant as possible. So thank you for I really thank you for your patience. My major professor once said, never apologize for a talk. He didn't hear this one. So I'm sorry that the technology was not helpful, and it took too long, and I hope I didn't take too long, and I couldn't see my screen because I don't know my own computer very well. So he's probably somewhere, I don't know, his ears might be burning, but I apologize for apologizing, and I thank you most sincerely for listening. Thank you. I don't know what to do now. Did I run out of time? I mean,
you're good, May. I think we have time for, if we have one quick question from the audience here, or if we have a question from folks online who can put it into the chat, or if somebody wants to walk up to the mic. Quick question before we break. No one's jumping on it, so I'm going to say thank you so much, May. We really appreciate your time and flexibility and patience of everybody here as well.
And again, thank you all for being so kind and indulgent. Thank you.